This is Mike Cothran talking to you from beautiful downtown Humble, Texas, where it's extremely wet this week. Beta was full of water. Anyway, I've talked to Miranda and encouraged her not to do a survey on how many of you are in jammies this morning, but I can tell you for my part, I won't be standing up with the camera on. In front of you today, we have the three different segments of what we're going to go over today. We'll walk around the forms, which is an introduction to post-tension form building, deficiencies that frankly occur in pre-owned and new foundations, and reporting in the trick method or manner. And that's actually for the benefit not only of you, but of your client. And maybe more importantly, your client. We have 100 slides to go through this morning, 120. The good news is 20 of them are text like this, and we will be moving rather swiftly this morning. So let's go ahead and dive into it. We're going to walk around there. We're going to learn what it is to do the forms. Let me see if I can click through. There we go. Okay. Your basics are that most post-tension slabs are a hybrid. They're actually a combination of post-tension cables and rebar, and some mesh sometimes as well, steel mesh. The installation and inspection start with plans, and then in order to use plans, you got to be able to read them. And then concrete is not poured, it is placed, as you'll see as we go through, and then time is of the essence once the makeup is done to put the concrete in it, because the forms begin to deteriorate immediately. And one other thing that I wanted to mention is this is the basis of your client's investment. So this is a big deal. These inspecting these things, don't take it lightly or as an ancillary way to make money. This is everything sits on the foundation, so it's the basis of the investment, and so it's important for you to take your job seriously here. Okay, there you can see that it's a hybrid. We have both cables and we have rebar in this particular picture. And every time you see the two of them together, they need to be tied together. So we have two rebars in at least 3 locations in the picture that are not wire tied. Everything works as a unit and moves as a single function. And this is why we need plans. Best laid plans of mice and men, and you can see that this is a made-up picture, but it pretty much demonstrates why we have to have some plans in order to guide us as inspectors. And on this picture, you can see at the bottom right, those plans need to be engineered, and that's a decree of the IRC. And they need to be signed by that particular engineer, and he needs to be licensed in the state of Texas in all of our cases. The plans also should have the builder's name, the address, be address specific, and then the plan names. And so when you see plans, when you're fortunate enough to get plans, you should note that. This is the final page of the plans that you'll be dealing with when you're inspecting or installing a post-tension foundation, and that's called a beam detail in the jargon of the industry. And it cuts, gives a cross section of each and every one of the beams, which we'll talk about later, and how they're built, what kind of cables or rebar they have in them, rebar cages, whatever the case may be. We talked about placing and not pouring, and honestly, in the 80s, when I did a good portion of my superintending and builder time, we didn't ever use pump trucks because they were too expensive. Now it's extremely commonplace. And not only the mix that comes from the concrete truck, get the left of the picture, but then runs through the truck's pumping system and down to the makeup area where it's going to be placed, is all controlled in terms of the amount of water that goes into it. Okay, this I'm going to take just a brief minute and talk about something that, and I don't have a good picture of it because it's not possible to make one. I don't think. I thought I put one on here, but anyway. Sometimes you'll go into a garage of a finished home, and at the car stop, on all three sides of the garage sunken area, there'll be a crack. And the reason that that happens is because when they place the concrete, particularly on a hot day, and they don't have complete control of the concrete, they will do the finished floor level of the foundation and hold the truck and hold the pouring or the placement of the concrete into the step down area of the garage. When they do that and too much time has elapsed, that becomes a cold joint and an instant crack when any kind of movement goes along. So just watch for that on your finished homes. And that would be the reason why you've got the cracking there, then you know. Okay, there's some of those areas right there. And I think hopefully you can see my cursor that's going along right there. And it is, this is a porch, and this is the garage. And let's see, I think I've got another one. Yeah, there's the porch. On this particular porch, you can see a tall piece of metal standing up here and some little bitty metal standing right there. Those are the attaching devices that connect the foundation to the frame. Okay, in every foundation, you have a set of plans that you want to go by. If you get called out on a pre-placement inspection and there are no plans, or you find that there were no plans used, the makeup installer did it by the seat of his pants, I suggest to you, and I have walked away, because that means that you're the one that's approving the installation and the structural integrity of that, and we are just not capable of that as inspectors. Okay, once the foundation has, you know what, this picture, see those little wires that go back and forth? Those are all welded together. That's that mesh that I was talking about a little earlier. Once the makeup is finished, time is really of the essence to get concrete in it, because rain and even gravity can begin the deterioration process of the makeup. Okay. I wanted to let you know that I'm assuming that many of you have come on to get a kind of a primer on what goes on in terms of your being able or competent to do a pre-placement inspection. It's not something that you can learn in 2 hours. The certification process by PTI, the Post-Tension Institute, is 3 days. And fortunately, TPRIA has and InterNACHI has in the past given 2 or 3 weekend sessions with a test included that you should have taken advantage of. I hope you did. That makes you a little more certified to do it. And even then, you really need a mentor. You need somebody who knows what they're doing that you can go out with just to see how and what you're supposed to look for, because in any class that you've taken, you know as well as I that you can't get all of the I's dotted and T's crossed in those classes. You're going to find some stuff that's just weird. And so plan to do some apprenticing. And one final note is, even when you do this inspection, just as when you do a TREC inspection, you are not an intermediary for your client between them and the builder. So don't get caught in the middle of it. So many inspectors call me and they're trying to dig their way out of it. What do I tell this builder to make him do it? Well, you have no power over the builder to make him do anything. Where your real power is to serve your client and tell them what the condition of the makeup is and why it should not have concrete introduced into it, because it's going to affect the integrity of the foundation. Okay, let's go through the materials and the installation of a post-tension foundation. Those are the items we're fixing to go through. And in this picture, you see the boards creating a footprint for what will eventually end up as the foundation. Those are the forms. Tendons, also called cables. They come in a variety of colors. They're beautiful. They come in everything from black, red, blue, green, yellow, red, blue. I said that, didn't I? Anyway, those are your tendons. That's what it looks like in the inside. They're 1/2 inch, 7-strand, twined, twisted cables. At the end of the cable, and we'll wrap up or pull all this together, are anchors. And they go at the end of the cables or the tendons to help anchor them on both ends, surprisingly enough. Wedges. And I put live end wedges, but there are actually wedges at both ends of the cable. And there you see it in action. See, it goes at the end of the anchor, and there it is seated in the anchor. And we'll allude to this in a little while. Now, on one end of the cable, you see you have cables sticking out, and you have a black thing right here. And that black thing is called a pocket former. And it goes, and then you've got the anchor sitting right next to it. And that is the end that gets tensioned. And there's the dead end. And on that one, you see we have the anchor and the cable. You see we have taping right here so that it won't rupture the concrete when the tension is put on it. And then what we can't see on this end is the anchors are sitting, or excuse me, the wedges are sitting inside the anchor right here. Notice there's about 1 inch space between the two, where the installer has not allowed for that inch coverage of concrete. That's when on a pre-owned home, you see the little dark spots of about 1/2 inch, the rusted areas where the cable is poking through. Not a good thing and not supposed to be that way. There's another good picture of it. Now notice on this side, we have a 16-penny nail that attaches it to the form. And on this side, we have no nail. Not a good thing, because when that tension is put on that, this end is going to want to pull this way. Not good, not good at all. That would be a deficiency. 2 pictures of that. Oh, dead end anchors. Notice right here, anytime we have 2 cables or rebar and cables or mesh and cables put together, we put a wire tie on it again so that we this thing moves as a unit. That's a chair. We'll go back and look at some more of these as we get a little farther along, and that's the cat head. And the end of the cable that sticks out has a cat head on it that needs to be right up against the form right here. So when the concrete is placed, it won't pull up that loose part of the cable into the form and bow the cable. We want the cables nice and straight all the way back to front right there. And that cat head prevents it from pulling in and doing this kind of number when the concrete pushes against it. Concrete is amazingly heavy material. Notice the black poly we have on there, and anything not transparent will be fine. I saw one the other day. I don't think I put it in here, but it was it was actually a combination of red, white, and blue moisture barrier. Now the moisture barrier actually serves 2 functions. Its noted function is to prevent ground moisture from saturating up through the porous concrete. When you look at a concrete, or excuse me, at a garage floor that has like a white powder on it, that's called efflorescence, and that's the moisture coming up through the concrete. It dilutes or dissolves the lime in the concrete, moves it to the top of the concrete. As the moisture dries, it leaves the lime there, and the lime is the white powder that you're looking at. Okay, let's go on to installation. Just a note, if you haven't figured it out, I'm kind of cross-referencing into pre-owned homes as to what you might be seeing as you might inspect them. Okay, we're going to go straight to beams. Now these deep holes, these trenches right here, these are called beams, and they are the load-bearing members of your foundation. Your foundation is all one pour of concrete, replacement of concrete, but it has members that do different things. What you will find if you overlay the floor plans on top of this, that most of your walls will fall over a beam, so they become the load-bearing walls. Now this one, if you go out and are inspecting a pre-placement, should draw a little question from you in terms of this cable doing an abrupt change in position and going this way. It looks like it maybe should have been straightened out. So I'd consult the plans and find out what the heck's going on here, because that would mean that the engineer drawing this probably didn't have his glasses on, or maybe needed to see his optometrist, because that ain't looking good. Now, when I consulted the plans, I found out that the installer had not done this right. It should have been straight. Pull the tension on the cables, they will try to make the cable straight, and they do weird things like rupture and blow out your concrete. Oh, I did put it in. Okay, I forgot the white part. Well, should have done this on Memorial Day, shouldn't we? This is a float for a sunken area that happens to be the patio. There's a step down always, or almost always, in a patio, and this is how they form it. All right, let's move on to other things. And you know, sometimes we have gas, electric, and water and drains running through the foundation or underneath the foundation. This is an electric conduit running to an island from an outside wall. It's not crooked, it's not advised, and it's certainly not without engineers' guidance. Not something that we just jack up and put in if we forget to put in. If we forget to put it in, it's a mortal sin. Drainage trenches, we'll get back to the drains in a minute. Drainage trenches are critical to help the makeup drain. As I said earlier, water begins the deterioration process, erosion process of the forms. Okay, let's move on to inspecting it. That's what we do. You certainly don't want water in your beams. Edward Robinson asked me to go out and take a look at this about maybe 5 years ago. And it was an, oh my gosh, what do we got going here? We can't, you don't put concrete in at one end and just flush the water out the other end. That's not what we're doing. Water deteriorates the strength of the concrete through dissolution. And it was bad. It was real bad. Somebody could have drowned in these beams. Water also creates cave-ins into the beams, and you should know that beams have a prescribed width and depth by the engineer, and that's something that you also will be measuring on an inspection such as this. If you have cave-in, it's got to be cleaned out. Can't do it. What you can't see really good is this one has caved in and pushed the plastic out So it has a bulge at the bottom of the beam, and as well as this beam wall having caved in. Okay, let's talk about drain lines. You can cross a beam with a drain line, but you can't run this way on a beam, through a beam, because there's too much pressure on the drain line, and these are only made out of PVC, and it can crack it. Also, recently, the IRC has required that we have sleeves on this, so you would have a larger sized PVC pipe over the top of this, so this can more easily move if the concrete moves. The sleeve would go from one end of the concrete to the other end of the concrete in the beam. We talked about width and depth already. Notice the cable, how wavy it is along here. This one is actually not too bad, but I believe we will see see some that are worse as we go along. Roots. No tree roots allowed. No tree roots allowed in the fill that goes on top or coming through the exterior underneath the form board. Also notice that this cable is resting right on the plastic. Later on, we will see that these cables need to be resting right in the middle of the 4 inches of concrete on top where there is no beam, on top of the plateaus. You will count the cables, tendons going this way and going this way. And even if you don't have plans on one of these, which not very often, but occasionally I will not con a builder to let me use at least while I'm out there, because they think it's proprietary, which it isn't. I will let I will report the number of cables so that if anything ever happens, my client is armed with the information to go back, and the builder needs to justify why he maybe had not enough cables placed. Okay, all the cables need to be tight, nice and tight, okay? No wandering cables up and down here. Cat heads on the end of the cables play a big part in that because they need to be tight, not away from the form board. They're almost like a clamp. As you're out there looking around, just take a look around the makeup and see if you got any extra cables laying around out there. That might be an indicator that they don't have them all installed. It also might be an indicator that they got too many. So you gotta get, just as everything else we do, it's a reporting process. Okay, this is one of those beam detail cross sections that I talked about earlier. And here you can see that the cable is right in the middle of the concrete. Okay, and that's important. Let me move Miranda out of the way here. Yeah. They don't have any chairs showing on this, unfortunately, but chairs should be within 6 inches of the edge of the beam right there, and every 4 feet in between. Notice we have a tendon here showing and a tendon here showing. And then notice that the cable, as it gets to the beam, goes down. It goes down so that it makes really good contact and is maybe 6 inches below or so the top of the concrete. If we came to right here and we put the tension on, the chances are way greater for it to blow out the concrete right there, and we lose the cable tension and have a mess on our hands. Also, you should know that there is one of the things you'll learn in the Post-Tension Institute class is that there is a spray that goes 45 degrees on either side of the tendon, and this is where all the pressure is placed on this when the tensioning happens, right in this area right here. All right, tendons, you see here that they're tied to the rebar, but the rebar is laying right on the plastic. Not a good thing. Tub buckets. How many times on a finished home have we looked in behind when we're thankful or good enough to have a tub access to look in there and we see dirt? Well, we shouldn't see dirt. Here you can see that the tub bucket should be raised to allow 4 inches of concrete underneath and the moisture barrier. And right there, what they're missing is tar right up against the drain coming through the plastic. That's a big deal, and that's why we see all that dirt. Great entry point for termites. Great entry point for termites. There's another shot of it. We went through chairs wire tied, always chairs wire tied, cables wire tied, chairs every 4 feet with 6 inches, within 6 inches of beam. We talked about that. Well, I did put the red, white, and blue one in, didn't I? Okay. Where the cables pass under those floats that we talked about earlier for garages and patios and porches and so forth. We should have a chair that's upside down that holds it from floating up and being something that we might see when the concrete is finished. We want it, again, in the middle of the concrete. So sometimes chairs are not down, sometimes they're up, as in when they go under floats. They also are on their side when we come up against a plumbing riser. And that one doesn't have one, obviously. And the reason for that is, again, when we tension the concrete, it tries to pull the cable straight, and it'll crack that riser. Drain lines with a crack are not always good from a sewer gas standpoint. There is a weld cord running through a beam, but no sleeve on it. That's a pretty heavily laden chair right there. You can see that some of the rebar is laying on the plastic, but none of it is tied. Big deal to have everybody tied together. Okay, let's get back to, I got some of these slides out of sync here. Let's take a look at that. That one's coming up. Oh, there you can see the chair on the side, but it's not tied, wire tied. So that would be a big deal. That's known as a pigtail. It's a water line coming up from the outside underground to the interior wall. It prevents freezing damage, unlike when you have water just coming up on the outside of a house. It's a good, it's not required, but it's a good installation idea. Okay, now think about when we got that pump truck and we've got overhead concrete and the end of it, the tail is kind of flopping around, and it comes over an open drain line and fills it full of concrete. Don't know if you've ever had an experience like this or one of your clients has, but it's not any fun. Jackhammering foundation, so forth and so on. We do need to cap them to prevent that from happening. And frankly, duct tape over it is fine, it's adequate, but we need it capped. That's kind of what it looks like underneath the foundation, or underneath the concrete, once the concrete is installed. You can see on the ceiling there that the mesh that they had in there is all rusted now. So it was not laying in the center of the concrete, it was on the floor laying against the plastic, or where the plastic used to be. That is an island where we have several things stubbed up. One is a electric conduit coming up, and it's the wrong kind of conduit. Here we have two drain lines, and they're coming up. I'm sorry, that's a water line. Okay. And this is a water line as well. Obviously, we have a hot and a cold. We have two drain lines here, notice, and that would be appropriate. One drain line coming up to serve a sink and the dishwasher are not adequate. To properly do it according to code, you need two drain lines. One of them goes to the vent and the other goes to the main sewer line. And that's a detail for another class, but that is the case. Now, what they're missing here is in the electric. So that you would note on the report. There is the electric conduit coming in. I don't know who edited this thing, but it's like firing. Okay, I have a question here. Let's see, I can only see part of it. Mike, can you address the vapor barrier requirement as standard of practice to omit plastic in the bottom of beams? Let me move it over here. I call it out immediately. Okay, all right, good question. All right, we had the vapor barrier, and then it goes down into the beam. Now, let's go to the outside beam, the exterior beam. It should go down the dirt and into the beam across over to the outside, and the outside dirt that would be, just to orient you, underneath the form board should not be covered. City engineers and city inspectors sometimes call for different things, but the difference really has to do with the supplemental grounding and the ability for the foundation to release moisture into the soils. And that's the difference, and that's why it's that way. Okay, now we talked a little bit about the metal things that were sticking up on a concrete placement, tying the frame to the foundation. This is a method called anchor bolts right here. And these are installed directly after the placement while the concrete is still wet. So are those other metal straps that we saw. One is a frame strap and the other is a mud sill anchor that we saw in a previous picture. Okay, after the placement, 7 to 10 days later, it should be tensioned. So let's go right to that. This is a tensioning press, and let's see. Let me move my chat box out of the way. You can see it on a table. With an anchor installed at the front end. Here he's tensioning the bottom cable. In this particular foundation, we had a cable up on top and a cable on the bottom. And he's tensioning the bottom one. He puts 29,000 kips on it. Kips is a pressure rating, and it's roughly equivalent to the same amount of PSI. I think PSI comes in a little bit less, but it's a lot of pressure nonetheless. And since we have these going across the foundation and then going back to front, what we end up with is a grid of tensioned cables that are all pushing toward the center and provide the structural integrity for the foundation. Until this is done, this is not a structural entity. It is a slab of concrete sitting on soils that, as we know around here at least, move like a banshee. It's a nightmare. Once the inspector has come back and confirmed that the tensioning has taken place, then they come back with a concrete saw and they cut off the cable and the little nails that hold the anchor in. They're sticking out there. You can't see them real good, but they're sticking out there. And then they grout over them with non-grout. Now, when we see those in pre-owned homes, many times they will have been deteriorated. It's because they didn't use the right kind of grout. They probably just slapped some bricklayer's mortar on it, which is way too sandy and wrong kind of cement. Okay, now since the slab of concrete before tensioning is not a structural entity, grading and drainage, just like we have heard forever, is a huge deal. And it needs to be established almost before the concrete is placed, but certainly directly after the concrete is placed, so that water doesn't pool right at the foundation and have the ability to lift and lower foundations just in particular areas where the grading is bad. Huge. One other thing I wanted to call your attention to that is, see how the adjacent yard with the finished home is, whoo, my battery's running low. We're going to take a break in here in just a second, and let me see what's going on with my power. Anyway, that all the adjacent yards drainage is going on to this one right now. That's not a good thing. Here's your typical drainage patterns that you've seen forever. Now I know that this only is Class A drainage where everything's to the front. There's also one of these for Class B and Class C drainage that takes different routings. The point that I want to call to your attention is right at the foundation, the grade moves away from the foundation, so we don't have any ponding at the foundation. That is the major cause of foundation movement, at least in elastic soils. This I just came across. It is a potential vertical rise. It's a map that was put together by, hold on just a second, Geotech, and David Eastwood. And I want you to look at how much the soils can move from season to season, wet to dry season there in areas around Houston. It was actually kind of amazing to me, but not a huge surprise. If you, those of you who are familiar with Houston, if you notice out here in the Dayton area and then over near Crosby where Newport is, look at how much that moves, 5 to 6 inches. That's a bunch of movement. And then in the southwest part of town, look at all the movement that's over there and over near Hobby where Sagemont is. These are all areas that are known for foundation issues. But pretty interesting on this one. It's just something that he's just put out, and I think it's exclusive to David. So thank you, David. All right, let's take a minute. Let's see, where are we at on time? Let's take a minute and take some questions, Miranda, if you want to do that.
Yeah, so we just had one question on the Q&A. Which PTI certification do you recommend for residential home inspectors wanting to get into more pre-pour inspecting?
No problem. Level 1.
Okay, and then we had another, what is the minimum exposed tendon length needed for tensioning?
About 4 inches. What they do, that's really short. I know, I've seen them do it even with short. They have something called a donut. They attach to whatever's sticking out, and they attach a longer tail onto that so they can grip it with the tensioning device.
Okay, I think those are the only questions so far. Oh, actually, someone just asked you to please cover again the details on when plumbing can cross a beam.
Say it again.
cover the details on when plumbing can cross a beam.
Plumbing, oh, okay, all right, good. It can cross a beam anywhere. It just can't run in the beam. And it should have a sleeve over it, so you have the actual drain line covered with a sleeve very similar to the sleeve that we should be seeing underneath the meter on the riser that goes up to the meter, so that it can slip, one can slip and slide inside the other.
Perfect. It looks like those are the only questions so far.
Wow, we got an intelligent group, and I'm just reviewing with them. How good is that? Okay. We're going to look at deficiencies and anomalies in both pre-owned and new homes that we might see. I think most of us are doing new home inspections at the finish stage. Want to caution you not to get yourself in a bind by putting yourself out there as being able to do pre-placement inspections, which is what we're going over today, and framing inspections. Now, my qualifications, my personal qualifications for that are IRC certification as a combination residential, and in fact, it's actually not with ICC. I'm a legacy from CABO, if any of you know what that means. And then the other one is a PTI, Post-Tension Institute Level 1 Inspector certifications. Surprisingly enough, though, I will tell you that probably my best credential is 15 years as a home builder of post-tension and foundation homes, and on-the-job exposure, learning and growing and seeing all kind of deficiencies and weird stuff happen, and things that are out of place. So that's why early on I put onto this that you really need to pair up with somebody who knows what they're doing and do a little apprenticeship on it. I know in these days of fast track licensing with Trek that appraisal or apprenticing is relatively unknown. But if you think about the great professions of the world, most notably the Masons, it has always been that they didn't vary from the apprenticeship learning process. And so actually on the ground training, on the job training, I think is my biggest certification. Okay. Those are the things we're fixing to go through, and we're, I think, running really good on time here. So I guess I better slow down a little bit. Otherwise, we're going to be finished too early, and I certainly wouldn't want anybody to go to sleep. All right, how about the next slide? Go. There we go. Okay, pre-owned and new homes, deficiencies and anomalies, cracks. Okay. As you're reporting, and I'm probably going to get into this a little bit before the slides have come to that topic, but when you have cracking in a foundation, it means that there's movement. It also can mean that there is the installation was not good. It can mean that the concrete was not good. It can mean it was way hot that day. But one thing for sure, if you have a crack, the surface cracking stuff, don't cut it with me. I've never seen cracks that didn't make it all the way through, certainly the 4-inch area of the foundation surface. I'm noted and have had several real estate agents call me and say, "Hey, I found your card in a crack. It was still in there." And so that I use as a pictorial, and I put it on my report to show that we do have some gapping. Sometimes we see the cables showing through, and we talked about that earlier on in an earlier slide, and that's not a good thing. It's not something to crucify a foundation. Sometimes we'll see that the inch of concrete coverage was not allowed for by the builder, and concrete is a porous material. And when water seeps through and works on the steel that is the end of the cable there, it'll rust it. And rust, as we know, when it forms, it expands the steel and literally pops out the concrete. We call that spalling sometimes. Not only has it spalled, but the grouting material was not what it should have been. Okay, there is the end of a cable before the cable has been cut. You can see the wedge on the inside there, nice and placed very nicely. Looks pretty even there, so we don't have any off-kilter wedges. There's one, however, that has no wedges in it. That one is not stressed. That's also something that when you come back to verify stressing, you would go, hey, we got no stressing on this particular cable right here, or these few cables right here. And so this is not yet fully stressed. That would be part of the reporting part of that inspection visit. Failed grout pockets we see a lot. Rarely do we see that the cable is still sticking through them, however, though. So we know that this thing probably needs to be checked and make sure it's got wedges up in there. So get on your hands and knees, get your flashlight out, look down in there and see what we got. Oops. Well, that one was certainly misaligned, wasn't it? There's another one coming out on the right. Sorry, we can't see the one being in the back. It was probably the juiciest one. Oh, let me go back just a second. No particular picture on this one, but the topic is spacing on grout pockets. So when you're looking at a finished foundation, whether brand new and grouted, the cables are cut and grouted, or a pre-owned home, if you should expect to see post-tension cables about every 5 to 6 feet. If you don't see any, they may have reversed the cable and it may be sticking out the other side, or they may have forgotten some. And at either rate, it should just kind of pique your attention and maybe something that you want to note on the report. Okay, moving ahead onto pre-owned homes. Many times, although this hip right here is cut cut badly, very badly, and placed very badly, you can note that there's a little bit of space between it and this board right here, which I believe is the ridge board. Poor perspective on this one, apologize. And that happens when we have foundation movement. Very bad cut, very bad placement. Fire that framer. Okay, there's a corner chip, very close picture there. On this one, you can see that the cables are sticking out, or excuse me, the rebar is sticking out down here. This whole corner right here is chipped off. Unfortunately, the picture taker, which was not me, but is somebody in the audience, should have swept the dirt off so we could get a real meaty picture of it. So here's a better one. This is a crack that we see in the corner of a foundation. Typically, these are not a foundation integrity issue. They are caused by thermal expansion due to lack of a thermal barrier between the concrete and the brick on the corners. The bricklayers, because of right angles, many times will forget to or not put one in there, unfortunately. So when the brick and the mortar and the concrete go to swelling and shrinking with heating and cooling, the concrete loses. And again, it's not generally an issue if the cable is not involved in the crack. You see, here's the end of a cable grout pocket right here on the right side. And so this one would be not an issue. And this one, sorry about that. That one's hiding from you. Who put this thing together? What a knucklehead. Okay, rebar showing. Rebar showing works just like the cable end we saw a little bit ago when the moisture, when it's too close to the edge of the concrete and the moisture seeps through the porous concrete, it'll rust it. And when it rusts, the steel expands and literally pops out the concrete. And it is a deficiency that we need to report. There's one that never even made coverage in concrete. It was right up against the form board. Piers. All right. We saw on David Eastwood's map of Houston, where we have a lot of shrink swelling going on, a lot of those ones that are 4s, 5s, and 6s in the inches that they shrink and swell. The cities or the smart builders or the engineers, in the case of unincorporated areas, are calling for piers underneath the slab on grade foundation that we're talking about today. And when you see those, you should see a bare pier top on top of them. And I'm going to go into an explanation of piers. I'm sorry, I don't have a good picture of this. They don't come along too often. But we should not see, depending on the engineer, most of them do not permit rebar sticking up on the end of the pier so that when you put the slab on grade concrete down, it would tie the two together. Some of them do, but most of them like the slab on grade to be able to float on top of it. Anyway, I bring this up so that if you were looking at one of these and you go, what are these things down on the bottom of my beams? It looks like concrete down there. Well, that's what it is, piers. Can you tell how deep they are? No. Can you tell if they're built right? No. You can't even tell if they're required by the engineer or have been inspected. Okay, there's some, when we have a house out of level, we do piering, and there's some pier holes on an interior wall. Pretty substantial there, pier holes, but many times you got to have some minion jump in there and crawl around and be able to put a jack up on top of a pier and push the foundation back up into the level. There's a cylinder pier on top of a poured pier and a jack. Once they get the piers put in, the jacks will be used to push against the pier and against the foundation to push it back into level. Who's in charge of this? Okay. Blowouts. There's a blowout. That's when the tension on the cable released, and with 29,000 kips, it creates quite a bunch of havoc. You can see that the foundation cracked all the way up into here and over into here. It was pretty rough. Now this was a little townhome in Kingwood that I saw this weird looking lump underneath the carpet, and I'm hoping that this next picture does not come in behind this one. I would be disappointed because I want to show you. But being the nosy, inquisitive professional inspector that I am, I go, okay, who's under there? Who they got buried? And that's what I found. This cable had blown out, come through the concrete, shredded the sheathing that covers the cable, and we did the necessary reporting on that one. Pretty interesting. Oh, apparently we got some extra blowouts. Okay, this is a commercial structure that I'm inspecting over in the Bel Air area, and you can see that they didn't even come close to using enough concrete around the cat head. It's not even covered. Cat heads need to be covered. They did a pretty good job of keeping it an inch away, from the concrete, but they didn't cover it with concrete. So the guy that placed the concrete is at fault here. There's another one. This thing was just fraught with them. I couldn't believe it. Excuse me. That last one that we just looked at was too close to the top. There's one where the the anchor, which is normally parallel with the edge of the foundation, had moved around when they tried to stress it. Wasn't going to hold anything. So these are the guys that are coming out trying to fix it, and they're doing it with a concrete chisel and trying to get down there so they can make a flat surface behind the anchor for it to anchor to. That's the fix. That's something that you don't want to see happen. See, this guy has got rebar coming up that they're going to attach the superstructure to. He's not really excited about getting too close to them, so this is a real precarious repair right here. And there's another one where two cables come out too close together and not even close to enough concrete around here. Now you notice all of the rock showing through right here. This is called honeycombing. And the way we get around that when we're putting concrete down is we use a vibrator that gets pushed down in the suit, and it literally vibrates the suit part of the concrete over to the edge. So we have a nice finished edge, kind of like right here, and kind of not like right here. Okay, grading and drainage is just huge. It is the #1 cause of foundation issues in Texas. So on the reporting end of it, this deck is way too close, and decks on grade, as you know, they mess with the grading. In fact, some people I've even seen dig it out so they can make the deck low enough. Not only does that make the deck susceptible to rot, but it also creates negative drainage where that area won't drain and puts it right up against the foundation to help cause foundation problems. It is a conducive condition to movement. Okay, this was a house that a trusted real estate agent called me one day. It's up in Porter, Texas. And she said, would you come out and look at this? I think we got a problem here. And so when I drove up, this house is in an area that has some hilliness topography, and it's at the bottom of the hilliness. So the water's going to run to this house. And so they thought, well, we'll just come in and fill the yard so that it won't drain to the house. The problem is they trenched, in some cases, 2 or 3 feet at the house. You can imagine that I didn't make note of that. There's our favorite diagram that should be on almost every report. It is on almost every report that I see that has problems. Let's take a break, Miranda, and do questions if we've got any.
Yes, we actually have quite a few. So let me start with, let's see. Someone asked, can any material be used in place of an actual chair for tables?
An actual chair?
Chair, yes.
Chair. Nope.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. That is incorrect. I was thinking maybe a brick to hold them up on. That would be a no. But sometimes you will see rebar that serves as a stake and is tied to the cables or rebar, and that would be acceptable.
Okay. Is poly recommended under the ground rod? I may say this word wrong. Oofer in the grade beam? Here, let me send this question to you, Mike, via the chat.
Say it one more time.
Yep. Is poly recommended under the ground rod oofer in the grade beam? UFER?
Yes, because as you know, it doesn't go down generally into the grate unless they've used it to try and stake it up. It connects to one of the cables.
Okay. Is it required to have a certification to perform pre-pour inspections?
Is it required? It's more like what you can get away with, and are you competent, and are you qualified and certified? That would be more of the questions. I would advise you, if you don't know what you're doing, to get the certification first. It's available online, but then behind that, you need to do the apprenticeship slash mentoring, because you trust me when I say you have not seen all the situations that you can come across.
Okay. And then this one is back on the vapor barrier question. Is there any allowance in guides to allow this departure from IRC other than engineer's stamp?
They have a prescriptive installation instruction in the IRC, but it applies primarily to what I'll call rocky terrain. On expansive soils, they step aside for engineers.
Perfect. And then
So it depends on your soils.
can the, oh, sorry.
That's okay. In the Houston area, I never see anything but engineers.
Okay. Can the exposed rebar be repaired using the cable grout?
Depends on how exposed it is. The last picture where it was on the surface, there's no help for that. I would certainly clean the rust off and grout, but in any case, we got to clean the rust off and paint it with like a marine paint or a Rust-Oleum or something like that prior to the grouting.
Okay. There's another question here. Plastic cable caps, as shown on the PTI design manual requirements, are important to mitigate corrosion of the cable end. They're asking if you have a photo of that. Maybe that's something that you can email to the class afterwards.
Absolutely. It's important. I don't think I included, unless it's coming up, I don't think I included it, one of them on it, but it's absolutely critical to keeping the cable ends, but it's not a substitute for having coverage with concrete. In other words, backing them away from the edge by 1 inch. And it is no more or less than a cap like you would find on your shoot, I don't know. On your, I was going to say on your lady's hairspray when she buys the pump sprayers, you know, it's a protective cap so you can't pump it. It's just a little plastic cap. It's generally clear.
Okay. Well, then that will be it for questions right now.
Okay. All right. You know, we had the question on the UFER. Let's dwell just a minute on that because there's a huge discussion on it. Since 2011, the NEC has asked for supplemental grounding, and it's primarily because the soils are resistant to accepting electrical anomalies of most any kind readily, and it is just another ground rod. It makes an allowance for the UFER rod to take that place of one of the two, and the resistance that I have to accepting that is that generally they go down and they attach to a cable. They don't go into the ground. And if they went into the ground, I know darn good and well they didn't go 8 foot like NEC requires. And then I look at the rebar that they're using for it, and it is not an approved material for a grounding rod. And if they go down and attach it to a cable, they only attach it to one of them. So the rest are two, maybe, if they have one handy. And the rest of the cables are not grounded, so it can't disperse it throughout the concrete. And then finally, If we did have some kind of a tremendous surge in electrical go into that UFA rod that connects to the post-tension cables, we talked about the heating up. Rusting is a very slow form of that, but introduction of electrical force is another one. Going into the cables, they would expand fairly violently. And what would that do to a foundation? The concrete foundation would rupture it. My opinion is yes, you'll have to follow your guidelines because everybody's all over the board on that, unfortunately. Wayne Rogers has landed on the side of they are not a second grounding rod, and according to NEC, they don't qualify. So that's where I come down on it as well, just from a common sense standpoint of the things that I just enumerated. So anyway, we are in the 9 o'clock hour. So let's go on to reporting. And reporting is something that half of what we do is as an inspectors. And this, we're going to follow the a la Trek reporting guidelines. This is not what you're required to follow if you're doing a post-tension pre-placement inspection report, because that doesn't fall under Trek's purview. Nonetheless, a lot of what we look at will be finished homes in a brand new homes or pre-owned homes. So we are required to render an opinion. I have inspection reports that are passed to me nearly weekly, as many of you probably have, that have no opinion as to the performance of the foundation. And most of them have an allusion to sending folks to a structural engineer. And to me, at least, that is sidestepping your responsibility and your to establish an opinion on the performance of the foundation. And I tend to walk away from performing as intended. It's a real nebulous way of putting it. And Mr. Wilcox in the past has gotten with me and said, don't use that because it's nebulous. You have no way of defending it. So I encourage you to not sidestep your responsibility. You are required to provide an opinion as to the performance of the foundation. And if it's holding up, it's holding up. And so what's the definition of performance of a foundation? Performance of a foundation is adequately supporting the loading that's placed on it. It's that, literally that simple. So you need to make an opinion that it's not, or it is. And if you are saying that it is not, then you're sending them or recommending the further evaluation by a structural engineer would be appropriate, because that's the next step. You're a generalist and he's a specialist, and that's what you do. If you say that it's, and excuse me, notice that I didn't say a structural engineer or a leveling company. And I used to a long time ago, but I don't do that anymore. And the reason why is because I found over the years that leveling companies do usually a great job of leveling foundations and supporting them. They do. But they do a lousy job of correcting the causes, as we'll get into in a little while. An engineer should speak to all. He should speak to the causes, the resolution of those causes, and the resolution of the foundation movement, or the fact that it doesn't need any right now. Now, the other opinion is that that you can provide is that it's performing its job as a foundation. However, what we will find when we go out there is that there's a lot of conducive, if you will, conditions to it stopping or not performing it. And a lot of things that it's working hard against. Grading and drainage is numero uno. Lack of full gutters or partial gutters. Cable ends that are showing. Cracking that is gapping or deflecting. We'll see a real good picture of one that's deflecting, or one that's offsetting, and we'll see a good picture of that as we go along. And we'll go through a bunch of those. Are you paying attention? Yes, I'm paying attention. Thank you, Marina. Okay. Everybody, the yes button. So we'll get into that. Okay. Foundation appears to be performing its intended function. No evidence of significant distress was observed as indicated below. That's my phraseology. Or foundation appears not to be performing its intended function. Evidence of movement was observed as indicated below. So, in addition to rendering opinion, you're also supplied the rationale for you reaching that opinion, and that's right out of the track book. So you should be doing both of those. I received a report last week that didn't provide an opinion, and it almost had 2 sentences under the foundation section. I will tell you that with pictures, my foundation section ranged from two pages of my report to 5 sometimes. And it kind of depends on what I found when I get there, because I want my client to have a pretty good idea of the condition of the foundation and where it may or may not go, and what I think about it. I also know that really needs to be the biggest section of your report. And just to kind of give you some comparison, my reports range from 30 to 40 pages. I'm not a 100-page guy. I'm not even a 50-page guy. Actually, I had a real long one about a month ago that was 45 pages. That I consider to be really long. But since the whole investment sits on this foundation, why would it not be what you pay the most attention to? It's also the most expensive. So kind of play that into your reporting. Reporting is many times as big a deal as inspecting. You also need to address a second foundation, like a detached garage, or like additions. So when you find an add-on to the main foundation, for example, for a, I don't know, covered patio or an extra bedroom or a front porch or whatever the case may be, you need to address that as a separate foundation. And you need to provide an opinion and some information on that almost separately from the main foundation, in the foundation section, but separately. And finally, an opinion, as I said before, does not mean call an engineer on every inspection. That would be shirking your responsibility. And it is not within your verbiage to ever say this foundation has failed. You should say things like more movement than I would expect to see, or that I deem as normal or beyond normal, whatever the case may be. Failed is one of those engineering terms, and they're the guys that are certified to say that, make that kind of an opinion. Okay, you also in that section need to report on what type of foundation we've got. Slab on grade. I also highlight that it's a post tension if I find that that's the case, although I do know that most of them are hybrids. Conventional. I have never seen a concrete slab that has no post tension holes in it that I could say was a conventional. I don't know what's in there. It's just a slab of concrete as far as I know. Pier and beams, obviously. Post foundations. Pontoons for pontoon houseboats. Sometimes just dirt. Just a dirt floor. Have you ever seen a detached garage that didn't come with the house originally, or an early old house that they just put the the framing on the dirt. They level it out a little bit and use some tar soaked probably telephone hose or something sawed down, creosoted, and then gumbo's funny. Sorry, that was just me being funny. Okay, reporting. Generally, you want to report underground drains and their functionality. So you do that by running water in them. And the reason that I put that on there was a house down in Westview, about an 80-year-old house that maybe 50s, 1950s, and it had cast iron plumbing in it and plumbing drain lines, and we're running water. I tend to, while I'm in the room, run water for quite a while to make sure that I don't have any clogs and stuff like that. And the one in the kitchen was right on an exterior wall, and as we're leaving, I shut off the water, and the client and I are walking down the side of the house, and underneath the foundation, the water is literally gushing out. Gushing out. It was unbelievable, running down the driveway, and it was just a matter of cast iron drains not being there anymore, and it was just something we couldn't see from the inside. You're also going to want water leak to report water leakage at hose pumps, at showers. So you're going to need to run those and plug them up where you can. It's kind of hard to tell on sunken showers, but plug them anyway. And even ones that have vinyl bases or marble bases, let those run for a while too and check the exterior of those, because sometimes, especially on an outside wall, they will be running down the outside of the foundation wall. Irrigation system underground leakage. Can't always tell, but as you run them and you're walking around checking the zones, you come upon a previously dry area that's now saturated, underground leak, and that'll cause foundation movement as well. You want to comment on the difference in slopes of grading on prospective sides of the home. So if you're on the north end of Houston, many times you'll get into the hilly topography areas, and the house on the right is higher than your house that you're inspecting, and the house on the left is lower, and to the degree that they may even have retention walls in between them, which is really a dramatic slope in the grading. And that affects your foundation in two ways. One is the foundation should have a 45-degree angle coming off of it that helps to support the foundation, the loading onto the soils. And the other is soil movement out from underneath the foundation. So notice what your retention walls are doing. Are they pushing away from the foundation or not? And either way, we should have that same slope away grading from the foundation that you're inspecting, so as to not have negative drainage back toward the foundation where water is held. Take a look for a piering or a partial piering. Difference in between the two of those would be you can't tell either one. In fact, you can see piering holes where the concrete has been broken out. It's really concrete patch holes, but you can't tell if there's a pier underneath there. So never say that this home has been piered, because you don't know. And you don't know whether it's full pier or partial piering. And that sometimes dramatically affects the future performance of a foundation. So if you think commonsensically about a seller trying to sell a house, and the mean old inspectors come and said, hey, we got a lot of movement going on here. So the piering company is called, the leveling company, and they submit a bid that says half of this house ought to be piered. But we can probably get away with just the garage that's poking out front of the house. And the seller goes, okay, let me think. The difference between 10 grand and 20 grand. Okay, I'll go 20. No, I'm going 10. And so that's all that gets piered. So the original recommendation was not adhered to. So that means that the other parts that probably needed piering maybe you're susceptible to movements. It also means, as we said before, that leveling companies don't really address the causes of the movement. And so they're still there. And 10 years, 18 years later, they can still cause the same, that tree right up against the foundation can still cause more foundation movement. It may not be sinking, the tree may be causing the piered area to go upward. So the items that I put on my report that they need to be asking for, because it seems that they're never offered or even addressed on the seller's disclosure very seldom, is engineers' reports from the peering, both initial and final. Yes, it's done, it's completed. The as-builts with a engineer's stamp on it saying exactly what where they put the piers. And this is different from the proposed diagram. Looks very similar, but it's different. We also want to know about the warranty, and is it transferable, or is there even one? And we should know who the peering company is to see if they're even in business. Finally, we want a hydrostatic test, and this is why I asked for that. I did a home in Kingwood about 10 years ago for a really nice couple, and they had foundation problems, and they were fixed. And 10 years later, I'm back in the house, and I walk into the bathroom, and he's cleaning up, and I recognize him, and I said, "How are you doing?" And, you know, he said, "You know, Mike, we got the peering done, and it was good, but we did not follow your recommendation on hydrostatic test." And when they peered his home, which required full peering, they broke, when they lifted the foundation into level, they broke a bunch of the drain lines. And over 8 years, everything that was going in into his drains was emptying underneath his foundation. And it was literally a quagmire. And at this point, when came the second time, his house was sinking into the north section of Kingwood, little subdivision there. It was pretty bad, and he was just blown away. Anyway, that's the reason for hydrostatic test after the peering. That should be something that you're going to want to encourage your people to get if it's not done, or look for a report on after the peering was done, however many years ago that might be. You're also going to want hydrostatic test on cast iron drains. And unfortunately, TAR was instrumental in getting a form required by TREC that the seller has to note that there may be damage caused by the pressure of hydrostatic tests. Now, those of you who know what a hydrostatic test is know that the only pressure on it is your ambient air pressure, okay, your atmospheric pressure at the surface of the earth. Because they plug up the drain line as it's coming out of the foundation, they pull a toilet, with a garden hose, they fill up the drain lines, and they wait for 2 hours or an hour to see if the level goes down. There is no pressure. So don't be afraid to advise your clients to get one of these. They're a big deal. And if you've got a home that's built in the 50s or 60s that's got cast iron drains, I can nearly assure you that much of the cast iron has now rusted away, particularly underneath the foundation, and it is the cause for foundation movement. Okay, if you see a primary condensation line going to the exterior of the house and it's leaking, and it's the primary again, I advise that these be attached to or tied into the drain line up in the attic. They will cause foundation movement because a cranking air conditioner may, in our humid climate, produce 15 to 20 gallons of condensation line water every day. And it literally swells like negative drainage right there where it's being dumped. That will cause foundation movements. Secondary condensation line leakage obviously is, oh my gosh, we got a drain van out there or we've got a primary that's clogged up. Nonetheless, you see them a lot that have been going on for a long time, and they will cause foundation movement as well. Okay, add-on foundations. You cannot tell if the primary foundation or the original foundation and the add-on are tied together. Most engineers these days, not all of them, but most of them, will tie the two together from a rebar standpoint. They will drill in and have rebar that crosses in between them. And that literally ties the two together so they don't act as badly as two separate foundations which can move independently. But what I just said, that phrase that I just said, independently, move independently, I put on every report where I have an add-on foundation, every single one of them, because you just frankly don't know, and they can. And we'll see some pictures in a little bit where they have. And that is part of your reporting. It may not be a deficiency. If they're moving real bad, though, it might be.
Hey, Mike, we have about 10 minutes, and we do have some questions whenever you're ready.
Okay, all righty. Let me scamper through the rest of the reporting, and then we're going to go very quickly through a bunch of pictures. I can't really tell what slide I'm on. Floor sloping and around level should be reported during window operation, brick drywall stucco cracking, trim cracking, floor gaps in floorboards, brick/window gaps at where the windows poke through the brick, expansion joint cracking, exposed tendon ends should be reported, live end tendon grout missing should be reported, soil foundation gaps, in other words, where the soil has dried up and pulled away from the foundation. One of my favorite pictures, and it works really good on a report. Soils and general and drainage issues. High and negative drainage against or near the foundation. Tree and large bush proximity to the foundation, blowouts, as we talked about. Partial flow gutters, downspouts at the foundation. They should have a splash block. Retention walls we talked about. Cracked tiles inside the house. Gap floorboards. Draw footprint. And okay, one of the things I use to aid me is to draw a footprint of the foundation and put on there where I'm seeing the issues. It can often let me know where the movement is taking place, just because of the indicators that I find that we just mentioned, that we just went through. Okay, there's a separate foundation. Tell me when I get to 5, Miranda, please. There's maybe a pyramid. There's 2 separate foundations. Great picture. Always include a picture of the separate foundations. There's your forever legacy diagonal crack above a door opening. I think we might have some foundation issues there. Tile cracks in the bathroom. Not always because of backer boards there, but when they are, it means it'll tell you something about the intensity of the movement. Sewer cleanout leaking. Subsiding soils into it. Bearing soils from the foundation are affected by this. There's the brick window gaps we talked about. This is a 35-foot hole in an intersection around the corner from me where a leaking storm sewer had literally drug in that much dirt, and the street just collapsed. 35 feet over probably 30 years, but I'll tell you the power of water and leaking drain lines. That's an expansion joint gap, and it was gapped at the top so that they know the high point in the foundation is right underneath it. If the crack narrows to a hairline as we go down. Crack in tile, window gaps again. There's a window that popped out of the hole. It was the foundation movement was so bad. Another tile gap. Whoops, let me go back to that one. That was a pretty cool one. If you look right here and look very closely, you'll see that the brick sags. This was actually a foundation where it was following, the brick was following the foundation. And if we look very close, there's a bunch of cracks on this. If you know anything about, about bricklaying, bricklayers follow the oldest and most simple guideline of a string line from here to here. There is almost no way the bricklayer would have laid them like this unless this started out to be a fun house at a fair. There's the window sheetrock gaps on the inside. This is in Spring Branch, and Spring Branch, Texas is known for fault city. And that was the fault going from the high over here all the way downward over here. You can see the slope. And this house followed the fault. It was sitting right on the dadgum fault. Brick window gaps where this brick is moving outward. Fairly substantial on the movement. This I pulled up in front of it. This is what that tree is doing to the curb on the street. May mean we have some issues right up in here as this house was pretty close. There's a mud seal anchor that's exposed on the side of a foundation. That I certainly would call because this part of the framing is not attached to the foundation anymore. See what we got going with the water on, see the water leakage that I've got going in there. Absolutely on my report. I also put on the report whether I can see the foundation floor in the garage. Always my favorite place to look. And this day of you know, staging the interior of houses, they go, well, just stick it all the extraneous junk out in the garage. And so I also put on whether I can get to the breaker box and the water heater and the sometimes the sprinkler controls, that sort of thing. The sewer clean, I mean the water cutoffs. It's like I hate staging.
All right, Mike, we have about 5 minutes.
Okay, there's an example of one side of the crack higher than the other side of the crack. No way. Okay, I'm spraying through. This would be a bad sign. Everything you're going to see on these, oops, how'd that one get in there? Everything you're going to see on these are something that you would want to report. Okay, Miranda, hit me.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me just get this poll out of the screen. Stop sharing. Okay. Let's see. So we have a question. Are detached garages required to be inspected?
Yes.
Yes,
And
okay.
the next one I see there, what is the main overhang? The max overhang for brick is 1/3 offset. 1/3 of the width of the brick offset the foundation. John.
And then, okay, we're not going to be able to get to all of these. Would you please go over the taping requirement regarding the maximum allowed exposed tendon steel?
Tendon steel. Okay. On the live end, it's right up against. Excuse me. On the dead end, it's right up against. On the live end, it can be as much as 4 inches. Less if possible to 4 inches.
Okay. Let's see. Can you define what a blowout is?
Sure. The cables are stressed to the 29,000 kips that we talked about. When for some reason the tension is released by faulty placed wedges or an anchor that comes loose and breaks free, that the power of that causes the cable to retract and blows out the top of the foundation, sometimes the bottom of the foundation. That's what a blowout is. And if you've ever been in a foundation, I mean in a subdivision where they're tensioning and they have a blowout, it sounds like a bomb going off.
Okay.
You don't want to be in the way.
Let's see. Okay, this question is kind of long, so I'm going to post this in the comments, Mike, so that it's easier for you to see.
Okay. I've had my chat out of the way. Let me move it in the way. Okay. On a P&B foundation, the piers are performing solid concrete blocks, no windows off, great multiple cracks and drywall, and the floors are unlevel. Will you render an opinion as to, and the floors are unlevel? Will you render opinions perfect? Just on what you've given me, I can't tell who it is that submitted this, but I would say that they need to have a structural engineer come and take a look at it. Sounds like it's in need of leveling to me.
Okay. And then there's another one about erosion that I just posted as well.
Okay, let me scroll down here. Oh my gosh, that's a long one. Oh, up in there. Yeah, no problem. Brick is 4 inches. Anything else is 6 inches as far as your exposure. And you want the positive drainage away from the foundation on all 4 elevations, everywhere. Let me make sure I answered it. There often be 1 or 2 corners of a house exposed by erosion. Yeah, you got to have it all the way around. One of the things about any foundation is what you do to part of it, you want to do all the way around. That's why sprinkling all the way around is important. Gutters all the way around is important. The grading and drainage positive all the way around is important.
Perfect. And then we'll do one more question. Someone asked, what are your thoughts on gutters? I see gutters on the front, but not the back. This would appear to cause significant moisture difference around foundation.
I would recommend them. I would ask them to consider them. And I would give them the reason why. And it's what I just said.
Perfect. Is there anything else that you wanted to quickly mention to the class before we end the session?
Let me look and see. I think we talked about just in order to do this competently, you need to have not only the knowledge, but the certification and the experience. So don't think this is just an ancillary source of income that you can jump right into. Remember that your numero uno is your client.